What's going on, motivators? We've got another video. Today I want to talk quickly about the binary gender. Have we even thought about what we're doing with that? The idea of labeling someone binary and how it could affect our social life. Let's get into this.
Two genders, and when do we start associating gender with certain roles in society? When I hear the word binary, my mind immediately jumps to gender and 80s movies about computers. And that's because outside of meaning something that has two sides or two parts, binary is often linked to the concept that there are two genders in the world and every person falls squarely into one of these two categories. And since lots of you Origin of Everything fans write in with questions and comments about things related to gender and gender norms, I wanted to spend this week getting down into an abbreviated history of how we got to the idea of binary gender, what the heck some of the differences between
Mind you, this is on PBS.
Gender and sex are, how those two categories became linked, and why we started associating different tasks in society along the gender divide, with certain behaviors being ascribed to masculinity and others to femininity. Okay, so we have a lot to cover and very little time, but the natural place to start here seems to be, what is gender, and how does it differ from sex? So to start things off in something of an order from concrete to abstract, human sex is usually linked to biological and physical traits of the body. These can include reproductive organs, hormones, chromosomes, with the old wisdom being that XX chromosomes signal females while XY chromosomes are indicative of males. Outward appearance.
All right, we do know that XX and the XYs. We do know that some people, because of obviously their mutation, that some people could have both chromosomes, right? Both sets of chromosomes as far as males, and they could have different appearance. Most of the time, as far as birth, the parents and the doctors get to make a decision into which one actually have the reproductive organs so that that person could live a better life. Because you don't want to be just hindered by having two organs. Stuff happen in life. There are genetic problems. We're seeing it everywhere. If you walk in Chernobyl right now, there's a whole bunch of stuff with what happened during that explosion of the nuclear plant. Multiple things are growing as far as genetic. But with that, it doesn't explain the idea of trying to just choose and make yourself binary. If you look at it to the point of when personnel feels a certain way, you have way back in history, I think in Scotland, people want to remain celibate. They try to dress up as men to kind of increase their celibacy. All in all, it still goes in the same thing, that they were still female.
Relates to the performance of roles, identities, and ideas surrounding masculine, feminine, or neutral traits. And more often than not, we link gender to both outward behaviors and internal ideas about ourselves. A good example of performing gender in society would be a statement like, all girls' favorite color is pink. The first assumption is that girl lines up with female sex, and the second is that given the choice, most, if not all girls will not only choose pink as their favorite color, but will also be naturally predisposed to liking pink over other colors. But this idea confuses cultural conditioning with a
Well, I don't really think it's confusing cultural conditioning. The thing is, like, majority of girls will fall, it's a natural trend to fall into the way feminines behave. Now, there may be an exception to the rule, one or two. It does not mean that now they're gender neutral because they have a certain way or certain thoughts about feeling about stuff. There are no different from someone who worked in the down south area where they are more farm equipped, right? More cultural to the countryside. They'll do more country stuff. We have someone who works up in the north because there's no country. There'll be a mindset as far as how they work. So our environment does help in shape us in what we do, but it doesn't really go into the sense of whether or not you are binary or not.
Presumed biological determinism. And if you want more on pink for girls and blue for boys, then this is the perfect time to hop on over to our video on gendered clothing for a deeper explanation. Gender also blocks.
All right. So my big thing about this, with this whole gender thing, is where does that take us? Now, I saw this posting for a school where it states total non-binary, total male, total female. I'm just being frank right now. Just think about this. If you have a kid in school and you know your son or your daughter is male or female, something happened, you would be, well, yes, we're trying to find an individual, what's wrong with her or he, they went missing. There's another part to this. They're gay, doesn't matter. They're still male or female. Transgender has a little piece that kind of like, makes it a little bit more complicated because be like, were they born female? What's going on? But at least they're dressing within that part into you could identify the individual, whether it be a man or a woman or a girl or a boy. But for the school part, just imagine that a kid end up missing. And we're in a search for that kid. And the first response, because someone checked that box, binary, we are looking for a binary person. What does that mean? What does that mean? A binary person. Is it male? Is it female? It's binary. We don't know. So the search is just looking for a binary person. What is that? Now, if he was a furry, I would understand, right? A furry, because they would be wearing some kind of costume type stuff to identify themselves as being furry. So even the furry, I'll give some kudos to the idea of the furry because I could identify what the furry is. But how could you identify what a binary person is? So more into the adulthood, there may be more of a description to kind of identify that person. But just for a kid's perspective, how do you find a kid? Because that kid has not grown any facial hair or none of that stuff, right? So how do you find that kid as binary? Binary is missing. Make those things make sense. Anyway, if you enjoy what you've seen and heard, please like, comment, subscribe, and share a Black veteran's perspective. Stay motivated.